Picture this. You open your banking app one morning, not because you're stressed about a bill, not because you're checking if your paycheck hit, but just out of habit. And for the first time in your life, you see a number with 6 digits sitting there, not in a retirement account you can't touch, not equity in a house, just money, liquid, yours. And something shifts in that moment that's almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. My name is Baldy, and I spend probably too much time thinking about the psychological side of money and why certain financial milestones hit different from the others. We already talked about what happens at $10,000. We talked about what changes at 20,000, but 100,000 is a completely different category. And I don't mean that in a motivational poster kind of way. I mean, it literally changes how your brain processes risk, opportunity, and your own identity in ways that are backed by actual research. Most people treat $100,000 like it's just a bigger version of $10,000, like it's the same transformation, just scaled up. But it's not. The shift that happens at $100,000 is qualitatively different. And if you've ever wondered why some people seem to reach that milestone and then suddenly accelerate while others stay stuck, this is the video that explains what's actually happening under the surface. Here's the thing nobody tells you about $100,000. At that number, your money starts doing meaningful work while you sleep. And I know you've heard that phrase before, like in some cheesy financial ad, but let me make it concrete so you can actually feel what I mean. At $10,000 invested, a 10% annual return gives you $1,000 at the end of the year. That's great. That's a car repair covered for free. But at $100,000, that same return gives you $10,000 in 1 year without you doing a single thing. That's a month and a half of income for the average American, generated completely passively. And this is where like the psychological shift starts, because suddenly you're not just thinking about your paycheck anymore. You're thinking about your portfolio like it's a second job, a job that doesn't require you to show up, doesn't call you on weekends, and never asks you to stay late. That mental model where you start seeing your net worth as an active participant in your financial life rather than just a number you track changes every decision you make going forward. But the compound interest math is just one piece of it. What really changes at 100,000 is the menu of options that suddenly becomes available to you. Below that threshold, most of the major wealth building vehicles in this country are effectively closed. You want to put 20% down on a median priced home? You need somewhere around $70,000 to $90,000 just for that down payment, depending on where you live. You want to start a real business with actual inventory, equipment, or staff? $50,000 to $100,000 is where most small businesses begin. You want to max out your retirement accounts and still have a taxable investment account that actually moves? You need a foundation to build from. At $100,000, all of these doors start cracking open. And I'm not saying you should rush out and do all of those things at once, but the feeling of having options, real, tangible, life altering options, is something that fundamentally changes how you move through the world. Think about the last time you were at a job you didn't love. If you had zero savings, your only real option was to keep showing up. If you had $10,000, you had maybe 2 or 3 months of runway. But if you have $100,000, you have the ability to take 6 months off, build something, try a different career path, move to a different city, or just wait for the right opportunity instead of the first opportunity. That is a level of leverage that completely changes your negotiating position in life. Here's something that surprised me when I started talking to people who had crossed this threshold. Almost all of them described becoming more willing to take career risks, not less. And that seems backward, right? You'd think that someone with more money to lose would become more conservative. But the opposite tends to happen. When you have 100,000 saved, failure stops being catastrophic. If you start a side business and it doesn't work out, you don't lose your department. If you take a job at a startup that folds after 8 months, you're not eating instant noodles for a year. The financial cushion doesn't make you reckless, but it does make you rational. And rational risk taking is exactly how people build wealth. The people who are truly stuck financially aren't usually stuck because they're lazy or bad with money. They're stuck because they can't afford to take the kinds of calculated risks that would move them forward. They can see the opportunity. They just can't act on it because the downside of failure is too severe. 100,000 in savings is the thing that bridges that gap. It gives you permission to bet on yourself in ways that people without a cushion simply cannot. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet, but is probably the most important change that happens at this milestone. The way you think about yourself shifts completely. Before $100,000, most people, they think about their finances in terms of income. They think about their salary, their hourly rate, what raise they might get, how many hours they worked. Their financial identity is tied to what they earn. But something interesting happens around the six-figure savings mark. People start thinking about net worth instead, and that is a completely different game. When your mental model shifts from income to net worth, you start making different decisions automatically. You think about equity, you think about assets, you think about what appreciates and what depreciates. That car payment that used to feel like just a monthly expense becomes a liability you actively want to eliminate. That company stock option you used to ignore starts feeling like something worth understanding. The whole financial landscape looks different because you're now standing at a higher elevation. And here's what's fascinating about this identity shift: it tends to happen even if you don't consciously try to make it happen. It's like your brain recalibrates once you reach this number because you've now proven to yourself with actual evidence that you can build something substantial. And that proof changes what you believe is possible going forward. Let me give you one more piece of this puzzle that most people overlook. The time it takes to go from 0 to $100,000 is almost always longer than the time it takes to go from 100,000 to $200,000. And that's not just motivational, it's mathematics. When you're starting from zero, every dollar you add is entirely from your own labor and discipline. But at $100,000, you have compounding working with you. You have investment returns adding to your total every single month, which means your money is essentially helping you save more money. The flywheel starts turning, and once it starts, it's very hard to stop. People who have hit 100,000 often describe the path to 200,000 as feeling almost unfair compared to the grind of the first 100. Not because they got lucky or found some secret, but because the first 100,000 taught them the habits and the second 100,000 got help from the first. So, what's the actual takeaway here? A few things worth sitting with. First, $100,000 isn't just a bigger emergency fund. It's a different category of financial life where your money starts multiplying independently of your daily effort. Second, the psychological changes that come with this milestone, the risk tolerance, the identity shift, the expanded options are just as valuable as the dollars themselves, maybe more so. Third, if you're looking at 100,000 and it feels impossible, understand that the hardest part is the same as it was at $10,000. It's not the saving, it's becoming the type of person who saves. And you've already started that process if you're watching this. And finally, the gap between someone with $100,000 saved and someone with zero is not just 100,000 in real life. It's access, options, confidence, and the compounding of all of those things over time. That gap is enormous, and it grows every single year. If you want to know what happens next after $100,000, what changes when you hit 250,000 or even $500,000, make sure you're subscribed because that video is coming. And if this one helped you understand the why behind the numbers in a way that actually sticks, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're at on this journey. I read all of them. I'll see you in the next one.